First, I want to reiterate the awesomeness of Level Up. We're here to help facilitate growth, transformation, deepening into being, into goodness, into truth, into love. Up is like taking everything I've learned from leading other circling trainings, weaving them together, what was missing and what was good, and like doing it all at once. What I felt was missing, Level Up just has in spades. So one thing that was missing was like one-on-one attention. So we have 26 hours of one-on-one attention in Level Up. One thing that was missing was direct feedback on your leadership. Just a ton of leadership feedback that's direct. There's always a way of being feedback, and we tie that in. Whatever skill point connects to a deeper thing that you would know automatically if you already had the way of being embodied. What I mean by that is, let's say you see somebody and you're like, man, they can't seem to like really trust their intuition. And then you're like, okay, so you can give them a trick, like, here's how you trust your intuition. But at the bottom of it, it's like they're trying to control because they're afraid of reality. And so the way of being is learning to trust reality, which will naturally give rise to trusting their intuition, right? We have this much clearer, like, yes, it's way of being, and here's the skills, here's what it is and what isn't, and here's what you can rely on and what you can't rely on, and like, here's some stuff that you like, a little tweak you can do, very, very specific stuff. Level Up does a really good job of integrating these pieces of like openness, emergence, surrender, mystery, uncertainty, the unknown, and structure. And one of the ways it does this is through the curriculum. So I'm going to share some screen, and you guys can see this, right? Mm-hmm. I'm going to link this stuff to everyone, but I just want to remind everyone that like there's the way the curriculum works is every single week there's a piece of content. It's a 20-minute conversation, a practice that relates to the content, and then a demo circle with commentary. So the demo circle is a huge benefit too, where like most of you guys, how many circles did you see a good leader lead? For a lot of people, the answer is literally 0. If you trained in like 2015, 2016, 2017, you probably saw like 1. Instead, you have 30 that you can see with commentary, which is a huge bonus. And you also get to see the certification process happening throughout, month 1, month 2, month 3, month 4. So you know what's being expected, and you've seen what it looks like. And you've heard us talk about like the reason we do this is this way. And because this is what happens when you're out in the real world leading circling, like people are there for the first time and they judge you no matter what your experience is based on this one circle. So anyway, so that's another huge improvement, that certification throughout, seeing the demo circles. I want to mention the structured bit. I think this is a good example where there's like there's a lot of like, working with mystery that we can structure. For example, we have this like sharing meta awareness. We're like, okay, here's a thing that you can do. You can notice your meta awareness and share it. This is the go-to thing that every single one of us, when we get circled on like our leadership, we'll notice some meta awareness thing that the person's like, well, did you think about sharing that? And we're like, fuck, that's a good point. I should have just shared that. Right? Like, you're circling somebody, you're like, oh, well, I didn't know because I'm like in this weird leadership position, but like, it's scary. I don't know if I should name this or not name this. And so I just ask open-ended questions instead. And then you're like, well, why didn't you share that? And you're like, fuck, that was a great thing to share. That's the meta awareness, right? And that's just like always the go-to. That can also be overused, but that's like the go-to like trope of like, where would you go with circling if you were lost, right? So we go right away into that. And that's like a practice that you can do and you can practice. And then we go into awareness of awareness. We go into noticing the control habit, right? So what's in the way of surrender? The resistance to surrender, control. So you can notice that and work with that. So there's like specific practices that do these like more difficult things that we can talk about that used to be somehow like so mysterious that we're supposed to just like pretend like we can't name it, and hopefully you just get it through osmosis. So I think this is super rare, not just like in comparison to like circling trainings, but like trainings in general. Like if you go to Landmark, if you go to some sort of like Gabor Mate's year of trauma training or something. Like you're gonna get practices and tips and tools, but they're gonna be like pretty closed. Whereas a lot of what we're offering is open-ended. We're inviting you into like a tip of like how to be more authentic, right? There's a paradox there that could easily lead to inauthenticity. And I think we thread the needle pretty well. I think another huge benefit is there's a ton of exposure to different leaders. So getting spread out in the one-to-ones and then seeing all the different circles, like people get a sense of like, again, like they're like, okay, there's a thing here, but it's not the way Val does it. It's not the way Jordan does it. It's not the way Fabiola does it. And it's much easier to kind of look for that underlying root that gives rise to the way we do it when you've got a ton of exposure to a ton of different leaders. And I think this makes it like this, there's a robustness and diversity that's actually a principle of evolution, right? Like monocrops lead to famine. That's the whole Irish potato famine thing. So like there's a huge robustness or anti-fragility, I think, that we have in our training that's, again, very, very rare because we're training a way that you can come into your own way versus a way to copy someone else. And again, I think this is super rare. I actually don't see this almost ever. And so, yeah, we actually encourage people to do this in week 4. So very, very early on, we're like, fuck following a specific set of things that we're telling you to do. Figure out for yourself, what is the way that you want to remember what's good and what's bad in circling? And then we're going to help you coach through that. So a lot of people will say stuff like, own your experience and express yourself and be present. And I'm like, those are great steps. What about other people? Those are all I-oriented. There's nothing about other people there. Oh yeah, good point, boom, right? Or someone else might do the opposite. And Alex Wheeler might be like, be with others in their world and like set yourself aside to really get what it's like to be with them. And we're like, yeah, that's good stuff. Also, what about you? Like, how are you going to show up? We can see where people bias. So then as coaches, and one-on-one people and all that, and advisors, like we encourage them. So we encourage that early on. And then throughout, there are little auto emails. Like I think throughout the 9 months, there's 4 emails that are kind of like, how are your principles going? How are or maybe they're not principles. Maybe it's an acrostic, right? Like you do nest, notice, empathize, surrender, and trust, or some other thing that you make up. Have you re-looked at them again now that you know more, now you've learned more? This is part of what creates like awesome leaders, is that there's a third order version of circling. It's like, if you guide somebody and tell them what to do, you're not doing circling. You're not being relateful. You're not being present in a relationship necessarily. Beyond that, there's a lot of creativity and creation that comes along with it. I think we included a lot of like really good structures that other trainings I've led have also had, including like the weekly peer practice, things like having the like monthly circle that's basically a big flow so people can feel each other. And then especially in the in-person weekends, there's a lot of flow. There's a lot of like not knowing what's going to happen and sitting in it and exploring. And I think that's getting even better as well. We're teaching how you can orient to that without losing the mystery and the uncertainty, but actually embracing it more fully, better than we ever have. We build this as a 200-hour leadership training, and it kind of echoes this 200-hour trainings of yoga, which is really standard people get, right? So there's a way of kind of tracking, like, did you actually put in the work to get this shit done? Which again is something that we were missing in the past. So in-person, like 3 in-person weekends count is 96 hours of circling. It's just if you sign up for Level Up, you're guaranteed at least 1 certification circle. Why 200 hours? Like, who cares? It's just a random arbitrary number. Partly because like people can relate to it, but partly because it's similar to like the way we've provisionally certified people in the past, where we're like, you didn't do enough circles yet. Like, you led a good circle, but I can't trust that you're going to be okay in the curveballs because you just haven't gotten enough practice. So 200 hours is like, we know they've gotten enough practice that like if they lead a good circle, there's a good chance they'll also be able to like lead multiple good circles. This wasn't a fluke. So there's just some sense of like, even if you could lead a great circle on day one, you haven't encountered enough range until you've done that much practice to know what kind of shit you might face, and for us to be able to trust you and certify you. This is like, I see a global need for better relating, because we're like crazy isolated with technology and lonely and in our weird echo chambers. And I see a global need for more mature and awake leadership, because we're facing problems that we don't know how to face and haven't been able to face before. And that this course addresses those. That's what we're actually training people in. That's what relatefulness is aimed at. Better relating, more awake, mature leadership.